Welcome to Talk Plus Water podcast number 6. My name is Todd Votler. Talk Plus Water is associated with the Texas Plus Water newsletter, a publication of the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment, the Texas Water Journal, and the Texas Water Resources Institute. My guest today is Léna Salamé with Water Witness International and the university's Partnership for Water Cooperation and Diplomacy. Léna is in Paris. I'm in Austin. It's a beautiful early spring morning here in Austin. Léna, what's it like there?
It's gray and rainy. Hello, Todd. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's wonderful to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you too.
Thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about water. I've been really looking forward to this. You're the first international interview that I've done, and so hopefully the sound quality will be good the entire time. There might be a couple little glitches, but if there are, we'll just kind of back up and go over something so that everyone understands what we're talking about. And with that, why don't we go ahead and start with a little bit about your background?
Okay. So, Todd, as you mentioned, I'm based in Paris, and I was born in Lebanon. So I was exposed very early in my life to complex situations, to conflictive situations, as well as mediation processes, because I had to mediate early on between my father and my mother. So I have more than 40 years of experience in mediation. But apart from that, I studied law, and then I specialized in international law at the Sorbonne in Paris. And then after that, I went and started working in UNESCO, the United Nations Education and Scientific and Cultural Organization, based in Paris. Well, its headquarters are in Paris, but it has offices all around the world. And there I served for 17 years as its program coordinator, the program called PCCP, From Potential Conflict to Cooperation Potential, which focused on research, education, and capacity building and conflict management processes related to transboundary waters all around the world. And then during that time, I followed several trainings and education programs on negotiation, mediation, conflict management processes, and was able to adapt these soft skills to the water topic, and therefore with several colleagues and friends of ours, I developed lots of material related to these topics, which can still be found on internet. If you Google UNESCO PCCP, and then you'll find heaps of material, research material, education material, training material on these topics. And then after 17 years, after I have given my youth to UNESCO, I decided to move on. And now I'm serving as trustee on the board of trustees of the Water Witness International, Scotland-based NGO, as well as supporting the university's partnership for transboundary water cooperation and diplomacy. It is hosted by the University of Geneva for the time being, and I guess we'll talk about it in more details later.
So it sounds like you had a background in mediation from the early years of your life, and you moved to Paris and you were studying law. And at what point did you start focusing on water, and why water out of all the other regions of conflict that there are that need some help?
So actually, I started being interested in water by sheer accident. When I was doing when I was at the Sorbonne, we had to choose a topic for our research paper. I was doing the first year of a PhD program at in the French system at that time, and the teacher suggested a number of topics. One of them was water in international law, and it was very new to me. I didn't even know that one could study water in international law. So I chose it, and then I became interested in it, and then I never stopped working on it since then. And actually, it turned out to be a good topic for me because, as if I don't, as some maybe of the audience may know, my first name is Léna, and it's a river in Siberia, and my last name is Salamé, which means peace. So maybe I was meant to work on water and peace.
It sounds like you were. Sounds like you were. I wish I had a name that suggested that. Mine's not doesn't suggest that, unfortunately. Well, let me ask you about this. So, tell me more about Water Witness International.
So, Water Witness International is a charity based in Scotland. It was created in 2008, so it's a relatively young organization, but it has grown very quickly and very efficiently. It employs around 15 people now. Some of them are in Scotland and others are in Malawi or Tanzania. And they are all experienced scientists and development practitioners with hands-on experience, who are very nimble and very reactive and very enthusiastic. It's a very nice atmosphere in this group, and their main mandate is to improve water security for people who need it the most. So they do that either through improving water stewardship, and when they do that, they scrutinize the private sector and the financial institutions' performance on water, and then they call them out on their bad practices, and then they try to instigate change when it's needed. That's one acts of intervention. And then another one, for example, is to improve governance and aid. So for that, they undertake research, investigation, they use evidence to advocate for effective and equitable water use and governance. And I'm very proud to say that in the past 5 years, they have helped 500,000 people in improving their water security through social accountability. So they are for the moment very active in Africa.
But do you think maybe they'll be operating in other parts of the world eventually?
Well, I hope so. I guess I understand that their objective is not to remain focused on Africa only. They work based on the donations of development agencies and sometimes the private sector and development banks and so on. So I think that they have to adjust depending on their financial resources and the urgency of the needs where they are and so on. So for the time being, they have been able to do a marvelous job in Africa, and I understand that if there are possibilities with the potential they have, they will be able to grow beyond Africa.
Great. Now, tell me about the university's partnership for water cooperation and diplomacy. That's, I guess, based at the University of Geneva.
Mm-hmm. So the University Partnership for Water Cooperation and Diplomacy is a network of knowledge institutions, like-minded institutions that are all working on transboundary water cooperation, diplomacy, conflict management, and who all want to make a real contribution to the global discourse on water cooperation and diplomacy and the nexus of water and peace. So this is a partnership of various institutions scattered around the world. Its coordination unit is based in Geneva at the University of Geneva, and it has a number of core members. So we have, for the time being, the University of Geneva, Oregon State University in the States, the University of Peace in Costa Rica, the Indian Institute for Technology in India, of course, the Kazakh-German University in Kazakhstan, IMI, the International Water Management Institute, and then we have another one, the University of Zimbabwe as well. So the idea for these core members is actually to be the driving force behind this network and to set up the platform where more knowledge institutions and more. I forgot also a very important partner. It's IHE Delft Institute for Water Education, based in the Netherlands. So these core members are the driving engine of that partnership. They are the ones who are going to bring and attract more universities from around the world, and encourage them to exchange their research work, to transfer their knowledge, to share data related to water cooperation and diplomacy, and to build and reinforce capacity building and training programs around the world. So the idea is to have actually a platform, an online platform, and this will be ready in the spring, to have an online platform where all the partners will be able to put their products there, and these will be available for audiences interested in the topic from around the world. So if you are a student in Latin America, for example, and you're interested in a study program or a student exchange program with a university in Asia, for example, you'll be able to go and get the information on this platform. So it's a one-stop shop for everything related to the topic. Now we have almost 80 institutions who have indicated their interest in joining the partnership, but I am calling, and I'm using this interview and this podcast to call upon Latin American institutions, knowledge institutions who are interested in the topic to come and join us, because for the time being we don't have many Latin American actors.
So now, of course, I'm familiar with Oregon State University and the water conflict and management program that it has. If you're a student and you want to participate, does your university have to be a member of the partnership, or could you be at a university that is not a member and still access this information and maybe find a way to study at a university in another country?
Absolutely. There will be programs that are joint programs among members of the partnership, and it will probably facilitate a lot of things for the students. However, if you are a student of a university in a university that is not part of the partnership, you can still access the information and find a way to get there. You can also be a researcher in a research institute that is not part of the partnership, and then get information about research positions that are interesting to you in a different part of the world. So it's a place where the partners will be able to make exchanges and to reinforce their impact, to enhance their impact. And to improve the global discourse on water cooperation and diplomacy. But it's also for our audience a place where they can access all types of information that they could be interested in.
So, is the goal to have a partner in every country, a partner institution in every country? For example, would you want more than one partner institution in a country, and would you want other U.S. partners besides Oregon State? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. So ideally, we would have a balanced coverage throughout the globe. For the time being, it's not the case because we just started a year ago. This whole initiative actually existed and was initiated more than 20 years ago, but then at some point it went to sleep a little bit, and then it was revived a year ago. So in this past year, we have we have attracted a few institutions, and we do not have a global coverage yet. We are aiming at that, and of course we accept more than one institution from one country. The idea is not to exclude anyone, but to include anyone who has the potential to contribute to the network and who wants to do so.
So if there are other institutions in the United States that are interested in joining, would they contact you, or would they contact maybe Aaron Wolf or somebody else at Oregon State and kind of find out about the program and then go from there? What would be the suggested route?
Okay, so they can contact you because you are also part of the network. They can, of course, contact Professor Aaron Wolf at Oregon State University. They can contact me as well. My coordinates will be available, I understand, on your platform, and then we will take it from there. So if any U.S. institution or Latin American institutions, for that matter, wants to join or is interested in exploring the possibilities to join the network, they're welcome to contact us in any way they can, and then they will end up being in touch with me, and then I'll guide them through the process.
So let me kind of, drill down into, I guess, maybe the genesis for the partnership. Is it, I hear frequently people say, water is often an area of diplomacy and cooperation that can lead to cooperation in other areas that are maybe more difficult for nations to breach or broach. What's broach? I think it's broach. And so, I'm interested in, have you kind of seen this play out in the work that you've done, where two nations were able to start working together on water, and then maybe eventually that led to other forms of cooperation?
Mm-hmm. So there are two things that I would like to outline before answering this question. The interaction between water and conflict. It can happen in two different situations. Either you have a negative interaction between two countries because of water, and that's what some people call water conflicts or water disputes or water wars, which is not true,
Right.
as a footnote. And then you have also situations where water is a victim or a tool within a conflict on something else, or water is one factor among other factors within of a conflict. Okay, so First of all, there is a study that was undertaken by Oregon State University that shows that water is never the only reason because of which two nation states will wage war against each other. There are more reasons to cooperate than reasons to have a conflict around water. And then there are no actual water wars in recent history because two states don't go to war for one reason anyway. Water can be the final
straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly, but it is not because of water that states go to war. Actually, they never go to war because of one reason, as I said. So we have to make the difference between the situations where we have a water conflict and the situation where water is impacted by a conflict on something else. So in those cases where water when we have a water conflict, when there is a divergence of views between two states on the use of water resources or the management of water resources, there are, as I said, more reasons to solve the conflict and to go for cooperation than there is for conflicts. In the case, for example, of the pulp mills between that opposed Uruguay to Argentina because of a story of pollution of pulp mills that were built by Uruguay on the Rio Uruguay, and Argentina was against that, and the population in Argentina went on strike and blocked the bridge between the two countries and so on. The two countries were in total conflict for that, and they went to the International Court of Justice, and it took some time for them to solve their issue, and at the end they went back and had to cooperate. In the meantime, there was the relationship between the two countries suffered. The environment in the basin suffered. The people locally suffered, and then at the end they were sent back by the International Court of Justice to cooperate and negotiate in good faith. Same thing in the situation of the Gabčíkovo-Nagymaros case between Hungary and Slovakia, but that took a much longer time. It took almost 10 years for the International Court of Justice to solve the issue. And how did it solve it? It also sent back the two countries to negotiate in good faith without saying who has to compensate whom for how much. In the meantime, the environment has suffered, and the relationship between the two countries was strained. So these are two examples that shows that the conflict over water the states have more reasons and to cooperate rather than to bring their conflict to a higher level of negativity. It is environmentally, financially, politically, and strategically not a good investment to go for conflict. Also, we know that according to natural laws, nobody can be deprived from their access to water. There is a whole ethical and legal side of it, so you cannot really deny. Water has a special characteristic. It's a special resource that you cannot actually go for conflict or war because of it. So that's one reason. And then I can see in the case of the Jordan River that, for example, water has been used as one component among others between Israel and Jordan to reach an agreement, the peace treaty agreement between Jordan and Israel. So it did facilitate the cooperation because it enlarge the pie in the negotiation over other issues such as security, religion, territory, borders, and so on and so forth. So yeah, water does improve the chances of cooperation, and conflict over water is not an intelligent way to go. Then there is another point. That's the situation where water is a victim of a conflict. So, the international humanitarian law has provisions that want to protect water infrastructures and water resources during times of conflict. And I'm talking about the 1977 protocols to the Geneva, additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions of 49. And there are many other instruments of humanitarian law that wants to protect these resources, not only because they are vital for the survival of the people and for the survival of the peace-keeping operations, but also because later, after the conflict, water can be an instrument to build peace and to maintain peace. So if you don't bring back water to the territories that suffered from conflict, you cannot guarantee peace and you cannot maintain peace. So bringing water back and allowing the local communities to access water and to manage their water resources is a way to actually construct peace and build it. So and maintain it. So you see, in whatever angle you look at it, there is a real linkage between water and peace that is much stronger and that makes much more sense than conflict over water. And then a final note maybe to say that an investment in water is actually the best investment that one can make, because first of all, there is a very good risk return profile for such an investment. It's an investment that is sustainable, that is a long-term investment. It is multi-sectoral, it is blended, public-private, it increases diversification of investments, because if it's on transboundary basins, then you have various different reasons to invest, for quality, for quantity, for tourism, for whatever, you name it. And because also then you engage many actors, so they are committed to cooperation, and then it increases the chances for engaged cooperation. So water is the best investment one can make. So financial institutions and development agencies, don't pull yourself back. Don't keep yourself from investing in this area.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking how many of the things that you just touched that I've encountered here in the United States and here in Texas, where we're encouraging our lawmakers in the legislature and in Congress to invest more in water, and how you have a lot of situations where two entities end up in court and nothing is really resolved, and they end up eventually having to sit down and negotiate some kind of agreement that they can live with, often by enlarging the pie, which you mentioned. I've been involved with one dispute where that was one of the key elements of its resolution, is it was broadened to include many more stakeholders and some other significant additional issues in a region. And so really there's lots of commonality, and but our system is different than I think what goes on in Africa and Latin America and the EU. And so I'd be interested in hearing a little bit about how France and the EU manage water conflicts?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So in France, actually, you have several layers of institutions and several laws that organize the water management system. So you have the within a European framework, you have a French system that wants to make a real balance between development and environmental protection. These are really the guiding lines. So in France, you have these are the objectives, and then you have, from an institutional point of view, for the management of the different river basins in France is made on the basis of the borders of river basins. So you have 6 river basins in France, in continental France, let's say. Then you have an additional one in Corsica, and then you have 5 others in overseas France. And the whole management system is based on the river basin management system. For every basin, you have a number of institutions. You have a basin committee that is like a parliament for the management of the basin, with different representatives. I'll get back to it later. You have a water agency that is actually like the main actor and for the management of the basin. I'll come back to it as well. And then you have a basin coordinating préfet, which is like the super mayor. That is going to coordinate among the different how do we say, the different communities that are involved in the basin. So you have this system, you have this parliament type of thing, you have the water agency, and then you have the coordinating unit. And then you have a committee at the level of the whole nation, of the whole state, that is the National Basin Committee, that gives advice on issues related to water policies and big questions of water management. So these institutions were set up in the 60s, in 64. And then their mandate has evolved. And then in the 90s and in the year 2000, more laws were adopted. And then their role became the role of the water agency, really developed, and it started to be responsible to fight against pollution, it broadened its scope of action to aquatic environments. It also supports the work of development programs and the removal of obstacles like dams and other kind of structures because of the program to restore ecological continuity. And then they also started to be responsible for fighting against diffuse sources of pollution from agriculture. So these basins organizations are the main actors in setting up, let's say, a scheme for the management of the basin. And they call it SDAGE, SDAGE, which is Schéma pour le développement et l'aménagement de la gestion des ressources en eau. So this agency is going to set up at the level of the basin this scheme, this plan, this like a master work plan for the management of the water resources, and it's going to be responsible of implementing it. It's going to also receive money from polluters and then pay money for those who want to fight against pollution and so on. So this is what we have at the level of France. Now, in the year 2000, the Water Framework Directive was adopted at the level of the whole the whole EU, the whole European Union. And the Water Framework Directive set a number of standards in terms of quality, of quantity, and quantities of water in the different rivers in Europe. And every country had to then determine their action plan to respond to these objectives. And then they could be even fined by the EU if they don't meet these objectives and so on. So in France, they adopted a law that is translating the EU Framework Directive to the level of France. And then these basin agencies became also the main actors in implementing the EU Framework Directive. So that's it. You have a framework, a European framework, and then you had the French system that adapted to the European objectives, and the whole the main guiding principles for the water management in France is to combine development with environmental sustainability.
So, I can just see some of my friends, kind of, shrugging and saying, well, that sounds a lot more complicated than what we have here, but I'm not really completely sure that it is. I mean, we have, federal oversight from a number of different federal agencies, and each state has a different set of state agencies that might be involved, and then you'll have local agencies. Some states on the river or watershed basis, and then you might have groundwater districts. We have 100 in Texas. We've got I think it's about 24, 25 maybe river authorities in the state. And then, the neighboring states have a somewhat different system, and we have to coordinate with them, which we do via a compact or some other mechanism. And so, all these systems are pretty complex. And, that's one of the things that I've always, been, acutely aware of is that, water is complicated, and managing it is complicated. And, I frequently get people ask me a question thinking that, well, the answer will be pretty simple. And it almost never is. And it's got lots of qualifiers. And so, I guess I'm supposing that's really kind of the way it is everywhere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that as a common friend of ours says always, that water management is conflict management, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you have a war over water. You have conflicts. It's normal to have conflicts. It's inherent to human nature. Whenever you have a shared resource, you're going to have conflicts because you're going to want different things from your partner or your counterpart. So conflict is inherent to human nature. That's one thing. And then a vital resource such water, which is actually sine qua non for any type of development, is really a reason for competition. So there is going to be competition all the time on water, and competition can be can worsen in some situations and develop into a conflict. And then conflict can be of different levels. It can be just a normal conflict of diverging views, or it can be a conflict that is accompanied by economical or financial or political punishments or whatever.
Penalties.
So there are always conflicts when you are sharing or managing a common resource. But then the main point is to anticipate them, and then to be able to manage should they arise. that's the real issue. I mean, you cannot have a world without water conflicts or without any kind of conflicts for that matter. The only thing is to actually have the ammunition to anticipate them, to prevent them if possible, and then to mitigate them should they arise. So in France, for example, they are very much based on anticipation and prevention, because these water parliaments are the ones where all types of water users are involved. They are consulted. They have their public participation right is very much guaranteed, and then they have to say something about the water policies and the management scheme, so that everybody is heard and that conflicts are avoided. At the EU level, on the other hand, when you are dealing with transboundary water resources, you have a convention that is called the 1992 Helsinki Convention on Transboundary water courses and international lakes, and that convention that was at the beginning only limited to EU countries is now open to the whole world for accession. So any states, like an Arab state, an African state, or a Latin American state, can access this convention. But now our interest is the EU countries. So EU countries, if they have a problem related to the transboundary management of a river basin, they can either go for amicable solution. This is the provision of the convention, so they have to go through negotiation, or they can go to the International Court of Justice, or they can set up an arbitration panel and then go through arbitration. So these are all the means of conflict resolution that have to be looked at when there is a conflict, and if there was no possibility to prevent it.
So I want to change direction a little bit here and ask you about your work with transboundary aquifer issues in Central America. So I'm curious how those countries are addressing those types of issues, and what are the more pressing issues they're trying to resolve. We just don't hear that much about that here in the U.S. We're a lot closer to Central America than you are, but we just don't hear a lot about what's going on there.
So actually in South America, you have 29 transboundary aquifers. Okay, so 29 bodies of water that are shared by two or more countries and that are under the ground. This is one fact. Another fact is that there is very limited information and knowledge about their dimensions, their geological characteristics, the water reserves that are available, the exploitation rates, or their role in regional development, or the recharge rates, and so on and so forth. So there are 29 transboundary aquifers. They are not very well known. The surface water in Latin America is much more important than the groundwater, and yet the use of groundwater resources to respond to water demand varies between 40 and 60% of countries' demand in response.
Similar to the United States.
So that's what Todd Jarvis, our friend, calls a hydroschizophrenia.
Say that again. I want to make sure everybody heard that.
It's hydroschizophrenia. Copyright Todd Jarvis and his co-authors. So there is this hydroschizophrenia because we don't know very well the groundwater resources in Latin America, and yet we are using it a lot. So in the beginning of the years 2000, the whole epistemic community, the development agencies, all kinds of intervention institutions started getting interested in this topic and started all kinds of research program, education programs, data collection programs to get to know a little bit better transboundary groundwater resources in Latin America. And that little by little, that led to for example, in the case of the Guarani aquifer, it led to a real collaboration between the scientists and the states and the development agencies and the scientific agencies. And then it ended up with an actual agreement on the Guarani aquifer system that was signed in August 2010. So this shows how, while there is a very big knowledge gap, it shows how real collaboration on data collection and scientific matters can lead to an actual political cooperation. But this with a little grain of salt, because even if the scientists and the development agencies and all these third parties interventions want to encourage cooperation and collaboration and data collection and better knowledge of the groundwater resources, at the end, the political will is going to really make the difference. So if there is real political will, then an actual agreement and collaboration will be set up. If not, then it doesn't happen. The Guarani Aquifer System Agreement is a good example because it started in the right way through the collaboration between the different communities, and then it used the draft articles on the groundwater, on the transboundary groundwater law that were developed under the influence of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and it really used all the main principles of these draft articles, such as territorial sovereignty, and then right to promote the management, monitoring, and sustainable utilization of the aquifer system, equitable and reasonable utilization, obligation not to cause harm, etc., and etc. The obligation to cooperate, the obligation to exchange information and data, and then it also gave provisions to set up gas commission, so a Guarani Aquifer System Commission, and then it also gave provisions for the resolution of conflicts should they arise. So, on paper, the agreement is really a good agreement. Now, I understand that it has not entered into force yet, but I may be mistaken. I have not updated my information yet. This may be a homework for our listeners. They could go and have to find what happened with the gas agreement.
That sounds like a good assignment for them. So I want to close with this question. So you've done training all over the world, and in conflict resolution for water disputes. And so what I'm interested in is, what are the areas of training that almost always seem to be the most beneficial for the people who are in the class that you're teaching?
Mm-hmm. So I will maybe say three things. First of all, every area, every field of every topic related to the training on water cooperation, transboundary water, and water diplomacy is important for every audience, because so far programs have been a little bit unisectoral, like lawyers are studying law, engineers are studying engineering, historians are studying history, and so on. Social scientists are studying social sciences. But transboundary water management is about bringing all these people together and then making them understand each other. So the main challenge is.
Okay, there we go. Now it's working again. So at any rate, I've seen that work in person where the training really is the key, uh, and the simulations are the key part of the training. It occurs to me, and so yeah, and I think we're on the same page on that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I this has been a great conversation, and even though we've had a few technical glitches, at least the neighbor's dog stopped barking right before we started recording. So that's good news. Um, and this was fun. I want to thank you, Léna, for doing this, and we will hopefully have some chance to work together again in the future.
Hopefully, yes. I'm very much looking forward to it. And thank you, Todd, for this opportunity.
Oh, well, you're most welcome. So this has been Talk Plus Water podcast number 6. My guest was Léna Salamé with Water Witness International and the university's Partnership for Water Cooperation and Diplomacy. Thank you for joining us and listening in.